Wuthering Heights, Episode 1, The Secret on the Moor, Welcome. For the next hour, there is nowhere you need to go, and nothing you need to answer. The modern world can continue without you for a little while. Let its bright screens grow dim. Let its messages wait unread. Let tomorrow's appointments remain where they belong, safely on the other side of sleep. You have done enough for one day. Now, imagine the soft rain beginning beyond your window. At first, it is only a faint tapping. A few silver drops touching the glass. Then the sound becomes steadier. It passes over the roofs and gardens, over the roads and railway lines, washing the noise of the present away. The rain carries you north, beyond the crowded streets, beyond the last warm lamps of the towns. The land rises and opens beneath a vast evening sky. This is Yorkshire, and before you lie the moors. They stretch farther than the eye can follow, dark with heather, shining with rain, crossed by narrow paths that vanish among the hills. The wind moves freely here. It presses through the long grass and bends the rowan trees beside the stone walls. It gathers around the chimneys of lonely houses and sings beneath their doors. But you are safe and warm. Tonight's story is a story of two men, of the house that raised them, of the moor that concealed them, and of a love their world had no honest name for. It contains rain, storms, secrecy, and passion. You need not hold tightly to every name or every event. If the story begins to blur at its edges, let it blur. If the rooms grow indistinct, or the voices drift into the wind, allow them to carry you towards sleep. The story will wait for you, and so, with the rain falling steadily over the Yorkshire hills, we begin. It was a wet November evening when Mr. Lockwood first saw Wuthering Heights. He had recently taken Thrushcross Grange, a fine house in the valley, hoping that several months in the country might cure him of the fatigue and noise of city life. His landlord lived 4 miles away. Across country, so open that the wind seemed to own every inch of it. Mr. Lockwood had been advised to wait for clearer weather before paying his respects. He did not wait. By late afternoon, the sky had lowered until it appeared to rest upon the hills. Rain struck his coat and ran from the brim of his hat. His horse picked its way reluctantly along the stony track, while the moor on either side faded into grey mist. Then the house appeared. Wuthering Heights stood upon the brow of the hill as if it had grown from the rock itself. Its walls were broad and dark. Its narrow windows were sunk deeply into the stone. And above the entrance, the wind had worn strange faces into the carved masonry. The word wuthering, Mr. Lockwood would later learn, described the tumult of weather around such an exposed place. That evening, the house deserved its name. Heathcliff, its master, received his tenant without enthusiasm. He was a tall man in his middle years, dark-eyed, strongly built, and grave. His clothes were those of a gentleman, but there remained something untamed in his stillness. He watched Mr. Lockwood as one might watch a stranger approaching a locked door. "You have chosen an unpleasant evening for your visit," Heathcliff said. "It was considerably less unpleasant when I began it," Mr. Lockwood replied. Heathcliff glanced at the windows, where the rain now moved sideways across the glass. "The moor changes its mind quickly," he said. The great sitting room was warm, though not welcoming. A fire burned beneath a heavy stone chimney. Dogs lay near the hearth, and old pewter dishes gleamed from a high wooden dresser. The room might once have held a large and noisy family, but silence had settled into its corners. Mr. Lockwood attempted conversation. Heathcliff answered politely and briefly. When at last the visitor rose to leave, the storm had strengthened. Rain flooded the yard, and darkness had erased the road. "You cannot cross the moor tonight," Heathcliff said. Mr. Lockwood heard no concern in his voice, only fact. After some argument, a servant led him upstairs with a candle. She was an elderly woman named Zillah, who spoke softly and kept glancing behind her. "You may sleep here, sir," Zillah said, opening the door of a room beneath the eaves. "But I would not let the master know I put you in it. He dislikes anyone coming here." "Why?" Mr. Lockwood asked. Zillah placed the candle upon a narrow table. "It belonged to someone who has been gone a very long while," she replied. Before he could ask more, she departed, carrying her footsteps and her light down the corridor. The room was small and panelled in dark oak. A great enclosed bed stood against one wall. Its wooden sides made it resemble a cupboard or a private chapel. The window beside it shuddered each time the wind struck the house. Mr. Lockwood undressed and climbed beneath the heavy covers. On the ledge inside the bed, he found a row of old books. Names had been scratched into the wood around them. Kit Earnshaw, Christopher Earnshaw, Kit Heathcliff, and again, more deeply than the others, Kit Earnshaw. Mr. Lockwood traced the final name with one finger. The cuts in the wood had softened with age, but someone had carved them with fierce concentration. He opened one of the books. Its margins contained fragments of a youthful hand. Complaints about a brother named Hindley, adventures upon the moor, and repeated mentions of Heathcliff. He read until the candle burned low. Outside, rain ran down the panes in silver threads. The wind pushed a branch against the window. Tap, tap, tap. At last, Mr. Lockwood slept. He dreamed he was walking alone across the moor. The rain had become snow, and no path remained beneath his feet. Far ahead, a light shone from Wuthering Heights. But however long he walked, the house came no nearer. Then the dream changed. He was lying in the enclosed bed again. Listening to the branch scrape the glass, the sound became sharper. Tap, tap, scratch. Believing the branch had caught against the window, he reached through the opening in the wooden bed and pulled at the latch. The window swung inward. Cold air filled the room. Instead of a branch, his fingers closed around a human hand. It was icy, wet, and slender. Beyond the glass stood the pale figure of a young man. Dark hair clung to his forehead. Rain streamed over a face that was beautiful and desperate. "Let me in," the young man whispered. Mr. Lockwood tried to release the hand, but its fingers held him. "Who are you?" he cried. "Kit Earnshaw," the figure answered. "I have come home. I lost my way upon the moor." "How long have you been wandering?" The young man's eyes lifted towards him. 20 years, he said. "Let me in." Mr. Lockwood awoke shouting. The window was closed. The rain still beat against it. But there was no figure outside. Heathcliff burst into the room, carrying a lamp. The controlled expression he had worn downstairs vanished when he saw the open bed and the names cut into the wood. "What are you doing here?" Heathcliff demanded. Mr. Lockwood attempted to explain the nightmare. He expected ridicule. Instead, Heathcliff became very still. "You said the name Kit?" he asked. "It was written everywhere. I merely dreamed what I had read." Heathcliff placed the lamp down. For several moments he appeared to have forgotten his guest entirely. Then he crossed to the window and opened it. Rain swept into the room, extinguishing the lamp and scattering cold drops across the floor. Heathcliff leaned into the darkness. "Come in then," he said hoarsely. "Come in at last." Nothing answered but the storm. The following morning Mr. Lockwood returned to Thrushcross Grange. The rain had softened, and the valley lay beneath a pale veil of mist. He spent the journey telling himself that he had imagined everything, yet the memory of Heathcliff calling into the darkness remained with him. At the Grange, the housekeeper brought tea to the library fire. Her name was Ellen Dean, though everyone called her Nellie. She was a sensible woman in late middle age, with observant eyes and the composed manner of someone who had spent a lifetime keeping other people's secrets. When Mr. Lockwood mentioned Kit Earnshaw, the teapot stopped halfway to the cup. "Where did you hear that name?" Nellie asked. Mr. Lockwood told her about the forbidden bedroom, the writing in the books, and the figure at the window. Nellie listened without interruption. When he had finished, she set down the teapot and looked towards the rain. "Kit always said the moor would keep a part of him," she said. "Perhaps it kept more than he intended." "Who was he?" Mr. Lockwood asked. Nellie drew her chair closer to the fire. For a moment she seemed uncertain where the story should begin. "He was Christopher Earnshaw," she said at last, "but no one who loved him ever called him Christopher. To us, he was Kit." The fire shifted softly in the grate outside. The rain began again, and Nellie told him the story. Many years before, Wuthering Heights had been a livelier house. Old Mr. Earnshaw lived there with his 2 sons, Hindley the elder and Kit the younger. Nellie was little more than a child herself then, raised among them and expected to help wherever she was needed. Hindley was proud, easily offended, and already conscious that the Heights would one day be his. Kit was different. He was quick-tempered but quick to forgive. Restless, affectionate, and incapable of remaining indoors when there was a hill to climb or a stream to cross. He came home with torn sleeves, muddy boots, and bits of heather caught in his hair. One summer morning, Mr. Earnshaw announced that he must travel to Liverpool on business. Before leaving, he asked each boy what gift he should bring home. Hindley requested a fiddle. Kit asked for a whip, suitable for riding his pony across the moor. Mr. Earnshaw was gone for 3 days. On the 3rd evening, the household heard a horse in the yard. Nellie opened the door and found the old man standing there exhausted, his coat covered with road dust. Beside him was a child none of them had ever seen before. The boy was dark-haired and thin, dressed in clothes too large for him. He said nothing. His eyes moved across the family as if measuring which of them might strike him first. "I found him alone in Liverpool," Mr. Earnshaw explained, "hungry, without family, and scarcely able to tell me his name. I could not leave him there." Hindley stared at the stranger. "Where is my fiddle?" he asked. Mr. Earnshaw admitted that it had been broken on the journey. Kit looked from his father to the silent boy. "And my whip?" Kit asked. "Lost," Mr. Earnshaw replied. "The horse went lame, and we walked much of the way." Hindley began to complain, but Kit remained quiet. The strange boy swayed with weariness. Kit stepped forward and took his hand. "He can have my supper," Kit said. "I am not very hungry." It was not true. Kit was always hungry. Mr. Earnshaw named the child Heathcliff, after a son who had died in infancy. No surname was added. He was simply Heathcliff, as though one name were all the world had left him. That first night, Nellie prepared a bed for him in a small room near the kitchen. By morning, it was empty. She found Heathcliff asleep on the floor beside Kit's bed, with Kit's blanket pulled over them both. From that day onwards, wherever Kit went, Heathcliff followed. They explored every path within 5 miles of Wuthering Heights. They knew where the grouse nested beneath the heather, where bilberries grew beside the stones, and where a narrow stream had carved a hollow deep enough for 2 boys to hide from the rain. Hindley disliked Heathcliff immediately. He resented the broken fiddle, the attention his father gave the newcomer, and most of all, the way Kit no longer looked first to him for companionship. "He is not your brother," Hindley told Kit one evening. Kit looked across the room at Heathcliff, who was pretending not to listen. "I did not say he was," Kit replied. "Then why must he follow you everywhere, Jim?" "Because I ask him to." Hindley struck Heathcliff whenever their father was absent. Heathcliff rarely cried out. He received each blow in silence, storing the injustice somewhere behind his dark eyes. Kit was never silent. He fought Hindley with fists, boots, and whatever object happened to be nearest. Nellie was often required to drag the brothers apart while Heathcliff watched from the wall. "You make matters worse," Nellie told Kit after one such quarrel. She was washing blood from his lip in the kitchen. "Then Hindley should stop making them bad," Kit replied. "Your brother will inherit this house. You cannot fight him forever." Kit glanced towards the door, beyond which Heathcliff waited. "I can try," he said. Old Mr. Earnshaw grew increasingly fond of Heathcliff. He admired the boy's endurance and mistook his silence for patience. Hindley's cruelty angered him, and their quarrels widened the distance between father and eldest son. Eventually, Hindley was sent away to be educated. Without him, Kit and Heathcliff possessed the moor entirely. They raced horses along the ridge, climbed to the highest rocks, and returned after dark, when the household had long since given them up. In winter, they sat together in the chimney corner, sharing a book while the wind rattled the doors. They developed a private language made from half-finished sentences and familiar looks. Nellie sometimes watched them carry on a complete disagreement without either speaking more than 3 words. Their affection was innocent then, fierce, unquestioned, and as natural to them as the weather. But nothing at Wuthering Heights remained unchanged for long. Mr. Earnshaw became ill. During his final months, his chair was placed close to the fire. Kit sat at his feet while Heathcliff read from the Bible in a low, steady voice. Outside, autumn faded into winter, and the moor turned brown beneath the frost. One evening, the old man looked down and found Kit leaning against Heathcliff's shoulder. "You must take care of one another," Mr. Earnshaw said. "We do," Kit replied. "You will need to when I am gone." Kit sat upright. "You are not going anywhere." His father smiled and touched his hair. "Every man goes somewhere in the end." He died quietly that winter, while the wind moved around the house and snow gathered against the lower windows. Hindley returned for the funeral as master of Wuthering Heights. He brought with him a young wife named Frances, who was pretty, delicate, and frightened by the severity of her new home. At first, Kit hoped marriage might have softened his brother. It had not. Within days, Hindley ordered Heathcliff out of the family's rooms. "He will work for his keep," Hindley announced. "He may sleep above the stable and eat with the servants. He has been indulged long enough." Kit rose from the table. Father raised him beside us. "Father is dead," Hindley replied. The room fell silent. Kit's hands tightened at his sides. But Heathcliff touched his wrist. It was the smallest movement. Hindley did not notice it. Kit did. He sat down again. From then onwards, Heathcliff worked in the yard and fields. His education was stopped, his hands grew rough, his clothes coarse, and his skin darkened from long days in the weather. Kit continued his own lessons, but he carried books to the stable at night and read them aloud while Heathcliff worked. Sometimes Heathcliff listened. Sometimes he took the book away and read for himself, slowly at first, then with increasing certainty. "Hindley may order you to labour," Kit said, "but he cannot make you ignorant unless you assist him." Heathcliff looked up from the page. "And if he discovers you here, he will shout, 'And strike me, then I shall strike him.'" Heathcliff almost smiled. "Your plans possess a beautiful simplicity." "That is why they succeed." But the plan did not always succeed. Hindley locked Kit in his room, sent Heathcliff to distant fields, and punished the servants if they carried messages between them. Nellie obeyed Hindley when she had to, and deceived him when she dared. The two young men always found their way back to each other. Years passed, not evenly, but in the way years pass in remote places, marked by lambing seasons, harvests, winter storms, and the returning purple of the heather. Kit grew tall and fine-featured. His expression could change in an instant from laughter to fury. He remained careless of his clothes, though even mud could not entirely hide the young gentleman he had become. Heathcliff grew broader and stronger. Hard labour sharpened rather than bowed him. He spoke little in Hindley's presence, but the old silence had changed. It was no longer the silence of a frightened child. It was control. By the time Kit had reached his 20th year, and Heathcliff was perhaps a year older, Nellie understood that their attachment had altered. She could not have named the precise day. Perhaps it began one summer evening when Heathcliff came in from the fields and removed his wet shirt beside the kitchen fire. Kit, halfway through a sentence, forgot what he had intended to say. Perhaps it began when Kit fell asleep in the stable, his head resting in Heathcliff's lap, and Heathcliff remained motionless for more than an hour rather than wake him. Or perhaps it had begun long before either of them understood it. They became cautious around other people. In private, their quarrels grew fiercer. They seemed able to wound each other with a single word, then spend the following day searching for an excuse to be alone. Nellie saw Heathcliff's hand remain upon Kit's shoulder for too long. She saw Kit watching Heathcliff's mouth when he spoke. She told herself that she imagined it. The law possessed ugly words for love between men. The church possessed uglier ones. Nellie had heard of men exposed before crowds, imprisoned, and, in darker stories, condemned to death. Such things belonged to distant cities and whispered scandals. They could not belong to the boys she had watched growing beside the fire. The truth revealed itself during a storm. Kit and Heathcliff had gone onto the moor after an argument with Hindley. The morning had been warm, but by afternoon the clouds gathered into dark towers above the hills. The first thunder rolled while they were several miles from the house. "We should turn back," Kit said. "Are you frightened?" Heathcliff asked. "Of Hindley discovering we have drowned and claiming it as a personal achievement?" "Yes." Rain swept across the valley before Heathcliff could answer. They ran towards an abandoned shepherd's shelter built into the slope. By the time they reached it, water streamed from their hair and clothes. The shelter contained an old hearth, a stool with 3 legs, and a bed of dry heather left by some earlier traveller. Heathcliff found kindling beneath a stone ledge and coaxed a small fire into life. They removed their coats and shirts, hanging them near the flame. Outside, thunder moved over the moor. Rain struck the stone roof with a sound so complete that the rest of the world appeared to vanish. Kit sat beside the fire, watching light move across Heathcliff's bare shoulders. "What?" Heathcliff asked. "Nothing," Kit replied, his eyes watching Heathcliff's heaving, hirsute chest. "You have been staring at nothing for several minutes." Kit looked away. "Then nothing must be unusually interesting today." Heathcliff moved closer. "Look at me." Kit did not. Heathcliff roughly placed 2 fingers beneath Kit's chin and turned his face. The thunder seemed to recede. though the rain continued around them. "Tell me to move," Heathcliff said. Kit's breath caught. "I do not want you to move." Heathcliff kissed him. For one astonished moment Kit remained perfectly still. Then he caught Heathcliff by the back of the neck and pulled him closer. The kiss held years of friendship, anger, dependence, and a hunger neither had allowed himself to recognise. It was not gentle at first. They collided with all the force of the storm outside. Heathcliff drew back only far enough to speak. "Tell me to stop," he said. Kit looked directly into his eyes. "I will never tell you to stop," he said with as much defiance as desire. And so the friendship of their childhood crossed into something new. Heathcliff took command at first, pressing Kit down into the dry heather while rain concealed every sound. Yet Kit had never been made for simple obedience. Before the storm had passed, he turned Heathcliff beneath him and discovered that Heathcliff trusted him enough to yield. There was no fixed master between them. No single part either was required to play. Each held, and each was held, each commanded, and each surrendered. Within those stone walls the world could not tell them which man they must be. Later, they lay beneath their coats beside the fading fire. Kit rested his head against Heathcliff's chest, listening to his heartbeat mingle with the rain. "Are you sorry?" Heathcliff asked. Kit considered the question. "I am sorry the storm is ending." "That is not what I asked." "It is the only answer you shall have." Heathcliff's arm tightened around him. "Hindley must never know." "Hindley knows very little. I see no reason to improve him." "I mean it, Kit." Kit became quiet. They both understood the danger. A servant's suspicion, a careless touch, a door opened at the wrong moment. Any of these could become a weapon. "No one will know," Kit said. Heathcliff looked towards the shelter entrance, where the clouds were lifting from the hills. "Nellie knows everything. Nellie suspects everything. It is different." They dressed in clothes still damp from the rain and returned separately to Wuthering Heights. Heathcliff entered through the stable. Kit came through the kitchen 20 minutes later, with heather in his hair and his collar fastened incorrectly. Nellie looked at him. Kit looked back. Neither spoke. After that day, the shepherd's shelter became theirs. They went there whenever Hindley's temper drove them from the house, or whenever the need to touch each other grew stronger than caution. Sometimes Heathcliff held Kit down among the heather. Sometimes Kit turned him beneath him and watched the defiance in Heathcliff's face soften into trust. They changed places without embarrassment, discovering freedoms that neither law nor sermon had ever imagined for them. At Wuthering Heights, Kit was a gentleman, and Heathcliff was ordered to serve him. On the moor, they were equals. Nellie asked no questions. She merely began placing a little extra bread near the kitchen door on evenings when they disappeared, and looking in another direction when Heathcliff crossed the passage towards Kit's room after midnight. She saw enough to understand. On some mornings, Kit wore his collar high. On others, Heathcliff worked with scratches visible above his shirt. Once, Nellie found Heathcliff descending the back stairs in Kit's white linen, while Kit's muddy clothes lay drying beside the bedroom fire. "You are awake early," Nellie said. "I have work," Heathcliff replied. "Apparently not in your own shirt." Heathcliff looked down as if noticing it for the first time. "They resemble one another in darkness. I am sure they do." She stepped aside and allowed him to pass. Nellie loved the men. She feared for them. But she also knew that warning could not extinguish what had already taken hold. Their love had grown in the same manner as the heather upon the hills, in poor soil, under hard weather, needing permission from no one. One clear autumn evening, Kit persuaded Heathcliff to walk farther than usual. They crossed the ridge and followed the stream towards Thrushcross Grange, the home of the Linton family. The Grange lay in a sheltered valley where the trees grew straight and the wind seemed to lower its voice. Kit and Heathcliff had seen the house from a distance, but had never been invited inside. "Let us discover what they do all day," Kit said. "Whatever it is, I expect they do it quietly," Heathcliff replied. They crept through the garden and approached a brightly lit window. Inside, the Lintons sat in a room unlike any at Wuthering Heights. The walls were pale, the carpet soft, the fire enclosed by polished brass. Candles shone in mirrors and seemed to double themselves until the room glowed with light. Mr. and Mrs. Linton sat near the hearth. Their elder daughter, Edith, played the pianoforte. She was fair-haired, graceful, and dressed in blue silk. Her younger sister, Isabella, turned the pages of the music. Kit watched with open curiosity. "They look warm," he whispered. "Then go inside and ask them to adopt you," Heathcliff said. Kit heard the injury beneath the joke. "I prefer the company outside." Heathcliff's expression softened. At that moment, one of the Lintons' dogs began to bark. The animal rushed from beneath the window. Heathcliff pulled Kit back, but Kit slipped upon the wet grass. The dog caught his ankle through the fabric of his breeches. Doors opened. Servants shouted, and lanterns flooded the garden. Heathcliff struck at the dog until it released Kit. Then a servant seized him by the shoulder. "A pair of thieves!" the man cried. Kit, pale with pain, gave his name. The household changed at once. "Mr. Earnshaw's son," Mrs. Linton said. "Bring him inside immediately." Heathcliff remained beyond the door, wet, rough-clothed, and breathing hard. "And that one?" the servant asked. Kit reached towards him. "He is with me." Mr. Linton looked Heathcliff over. "He may return to Wuthering Heights and tell them what has happened." "He is not a messenger," Kit protested. "You require a surgeon, young man. Your companion appears perfectly capable of walking." Heathcliff met Kit's eyes. For a moment neither moved. Then Heathcliff said, "I shall tell Nellie." The door closed between them. Kit remained at Thrushcross Grange for 5 weeks. The bite was not serious, but Mrs. Linton insisted that he recover fully before crossing the moor. His clothes were sent away to be cleaned. A tailor was summoned. His unruly hair was cut and arranged, and his boots were replaced by a softer pair that made no noise upon the carpets. Edith visited him each morning. She brought books, played cards beside the fire, and listened with delight to his stories of Wuthering Heights. She had an easy laugh and a gentleness Kit found unfamiliar. Nothing at the Grange was shouted. Doors closed quietly. Meals arrived at the same hour each day. Kit had never known life could be so smooth. When he walked with Edith in the sheltered garden, the servants smiled. Her parents watched them from the windows with approval. No one lowered a voice when they drew close. No one warned them that a careless glance could lead to the magistrate. Edith could touch his arm in daylight. Kit could escort her into dinner before an entire room. The world appeared to open for them simply because she was a woman and he was a man. Kit liked Edith. That truth made everything more difficult. She was intelligent, warm, and sincerely interested in him. His affection for her was not false. Yet when she rested her head briefly against his shoulder, he felt comfort rather than the fierce alteration of self he experienced at Heathcliff's touch. At night he lay in a clean bed, listening to the faint rain upon the Grange roof. He thought of the shepherd's shelter. He thought of Heathcliff beneath him, then above him. the two of them free to exchange strength, surrender, and exquisite pleasure without witnesses. At the Grange, Kit was admired for being exactly the kind of man society wished him to become. With Heathcliff, he did not have to become anything at all. Heathcliff came to Thrushcross Grange only once. Nellie had sent him with a message. He stood at the servants' entrance, wearing his working clothes, mud dried upon his boots. Kit hurried down the passage to meet him. "Why have you not visited before?" Kit asked, "or was not invited?" "Since when have you required invitations?" Heathcliff looked at Kit's fitted coat, his clean hands, and the ribbon holding back his hair. "You appear to have found the life intended for you. Do not be absurd. The house suits you. I am recovering from an injury, not applying to become part of the furniture." Kit reached for Heathcliff's hand. Footsteps sounded at the end of the corridor, and he released it at once. Heathcliff noticed. Edith appeared carrying a book. "Kit," she said, smiling, "my mother wondered whether you would join us." Her smile faded slightly when she saw Heathcliff. Kit introduced them. Edith was polite, watching the men closely. Heathcliff bowed with an irony only Kit recognised. "I should return," Heathcliff said. "Wait," Kit replied. But Heathcliff had already stepped outside. Kit watched him cross the garden alone, becoming darker and smaller beneath the pale autumn sky. Edith observed from the corridor. When Kit finally returned to Wuthering Heights, the household gathered to see the change. Hindley laughed at the softness of his new coat. Frances declared him handsome. Nellie kissed his cheek and said she was pleased to have him home. Heathcliff stood near the stable door. He had made an effort to clean himself, though his clothes remained coarse beside Kit's. His hair had grown long during the weeks apart. Kit smiled at him, unable to conceal his excitement at seeing Heathcliff. "You require a haircut," he said, laughing with shining eyes. Heathcliff's face closed. "And you require a mirror large enough to admire yourself completely," Heathcliff replied with characteristic roughness. Hindley laughed. Kit flushed. "I did not mean—" Kit looked appalled. He didn't take his eyes from Heathcliff, studying his face, his form. "The Lintons have taught you fine manners," Heathcliff growled. "You may practice them upon someone else." He turned away. That night, Kit went to the room above the stable. Heathcliff was lying awake, but did not move when Kit entered. "You embarrassed me before Hindley," Kit said. "Then return to the Grange, where no one will embarrass you." "Is that what you want?" Heathcliff stared at the ceiling. "What I want has never concerned anyone at Wuthering Heights." Kit crossed the room and sat beside him. "It concerns me. You dropped my hand as though it burned you." Edith was there. "Precisely." Kit understood then that no explanation could make the moment harmless. "Look at me," he said. Heathcliff refused. Kit caught his face between both hands and kissed him. For several seconds Heathcliff resisted, then his anger broke, and he pulled Kit down beside him. Their reunion was impatient and possessive. Heathcliff seemed determined to erase every trace of the Grange from Kit's body. Kit met force with force, turning their struggle until Heathcliff lay beneath him. Finally, the men lay entangled, enmeshed, the mass of muscle and limbs appearing as one in the candlelight. "Do you still believe they have changed me?" Kit whispered. Heathcliff looked up at him. Winter settled over the heights. Edith and Isabella began visiting regularly, arriving in a carriage that looked strangely delicate beside the weathered house. Edith brought music and books. Frances welcomed the company, while Hindley encouraged the acquaintance because the Lintons were wealthy and respected. Heathcliff was expected to serve at the table. Kit hated seeing him stand behind Edith's chair, but he did not dare object too strongly. Any unusual defence of Heathcliff drew Hindley's attention. In public, Kit courted Edith. In secret, he continued meeting Heathcliff. The contrast sharpened everything. Edith gave Kit her hand beneath the approving eyes of her family. Heathcliff drew him into dark passages and locked rooms. A chaste kiss from Edith earned smiles. While a glance between the two men might have destroyed them, danger became woven into their desire. Whenever Kit heard footsteps beyond a locked door, fear moved through him, followed by an excitement he could not entirely resist. Heathcliff seemed to feel it too. Their stolen nights became fiercer because either might be their last. Yet secrecy also brought shame, and shame slowly found its way between them. Kit began speaking about the future. Heathcliff refused to do so. "We could leave," Kit said once, as they lay in the shepherd's shelter listening to the winter rain. "We could go somewhere no one knows us." "Where?" "York, London, another country." "And live as what?" Kit turned towards him. "As ourselves." Heathcliff gave a quiet, bitter laugh. "There is no place where men like us are permitted to be themselves. There are only places where we have not yet been discovered." Kit wanted to contradict him, but could not. He could only think of Greece and what his tutor called their unspeakable sins. A distance, tiny, hardly perceptible, had begun to form between the lovers, obliterated nightly in their passionate love-making. It later crawled back in the light of day. In the spring, Edith Linton accepted Kit's proposal of marriage. Kit returned from Thrushcross Grange just before sunset. He found Nellie alone in the kitchen, kneading bread beside the window. "Nellie," he said, "I have something to tell you." She looked at his face and immediately wiped the flour from her hands. "You have asked Miss Linton to marry you." Kit stared. "How could you possibly know? Because you look like a man who has been given precisely what he requested, and discovered he does not know what to do with it." Kit sat beside the table. She said yes. "I assumed she would." "Her parents are pleased. Hindley will be unbearable when he hears." Nellie waited. "Do you think I have done wrong?" Kit asked. "Do you love her?" "I am very fond of her." "That was not my question." Kit looked down at his hands. "I love the gentleness in her, and the peace of her home. When I stand beside Edith, doors open, people see a respectable future. They invite us inside instead of turning one of us away." "And Heathcliff?" Kit's head lifted sharply. Nellie spoke more softly. "You need not pretend with me. I have washed your clothes since you were a child. I know when you have spent a night upon the moor. And I know you have not spent all those nights discussing the weather." Colour rose into Kit's face, but he did not deny it. Beyond the kitchen, in the unlit passage, a floorboard creaked. Neither of them noticed. Heathcliff had returned from the yard. Hearing his name, he stopped outside the half-open door. "Inside," Kit said. "There can be no life for me with Heathcliff." Heathcliff's expression hardened. "Why not?" Nellie asked. "Because Hindley has made him a servant." "No, never because of that. I would share a labourer's cottage with him and consider myself rich. I would sleep beneath the open sky if he were beside me." "Then why marry Edith?" Kit pressed his palms together. "Because Heathcliff is a man, and so am I." His voice became quieter. "We cannot marry. We cannot establish a home and ask our neighbours to dine. We cannot stand together in church. If the wrong person discovers us, we may be dragged before a court. Men have been imprisoned for less. and hanged for what we have done. In the passage, Heathcliff heard every word. Kit continued, his face impossibly sad. To choose him openly would not merely degrade me in society's eyes, it might destroy us both. Silent tears ran down Kit's face. Heathcliff stepped back from the door. He did not hear Nelly ask, "And do you imagine marriage will stop you loving him?" He did not hear Kit's answer. "I do not love Heathcliff as I love another person," Kit said through his tears. "He is more myself than I am, whatever our souls are made of. His and mine are the same." Nelly sat opposite him, watching him intensely, her love for him, and for Heathcliff, growing stronger. "Then you are preparing to deceive a good woman, and wound the man you say is part of your soul. If I marry Edith, I shall have money and influence. I can help Heathcliff escape Hindy's power. I can protect him. Have you asked whether he wishes to be protected in that manner?" Kit stood and walked to the window. Rain had begun to darken the yard. "With Edith, I can be the man the world permits," he said. "With Heathcliff, I can be everything. I have held him and yielded to him. There is no rank between us when we are alone. No husband and no wife. No master and no servant. Only us. Only forever." Nelly watched him with sorrow. Her tears began to flow. "But morning always comes, Kit," Nelly said, thinking of the great joy that had radiated from the boys and then the men. "I know. That is why I must marry her." Nelly shook her head. "You are building a fine house for yourself, but you intend to keep your soul locked in a hidden room. One day someone will open the door." Heathcliff was gone before nightfall. He took no clothes beyond those he wore, no horse, and no money that Nelly could discover. The stable boy had seen him walking west across the moor as the rain began. Kit understood at once what had happened. "He heard me," he cried in desolation. He ran from the house without a coat. The storm swallowed him. All night, Kit crossed the hills calling Heathcliff's name. Rain streamed into his eyes and filled his boots. He searched the shepherd's shelter, the rocks above the stream, and every hollow they had known as boys. Heathcliff, the wind carried the name away. At dawn, Nelly found Kit upon the ridge, soaked, shivering and still searching the empty road. "He heard only the part that wounded him," Kit said. "Come home," Nelly replied. "He always does this. He listens to half a thought and punishes me for the rest. Come home, Kit. He will return." But Heathcliff did not return. Kit developed a fever from the night upon the moor. For several days he drifted between sleep and waking, calling Heathcliff's name whenever rain touched the windows. Edith came to Wuthering Heights and helped Nelly care for him. She sat beside the bed, reading quietly until Kit recovered. He was grateful and ashamed of his gratitude. 3 years passed. No word came from Heathcliff. Kit married Edith Linton in the little stone church beneath the moor. It was a bright spring morning. Bells rang across the valley. Edith wore ivory silk, and Kit stood beside her in a dark blue coat. Their families smiled. The servants gathered outside, and every public blessing rested upon them. Kit spoke his vows clearly. Only Nelly noticed him glance towards the church door when the wind moved it upon its hinges. After the wedding, Kit went to live at Thrushcross Grange. He became the man society had promised he might be. He dined with magistrates, managed the estate, escorted Edith to assemblies, and sat beside her in church. People admired the handsome young couple and predicted a long, fortunate marriage. Edith loved him, Kit cared for her tenderly and tried to deserve that love. Yet, on wet evenings, Kit stood at the windows of Thrushcross Grange and looked towards Wuthering Heights. When thunder moved above the hills, he remembered the stone shelter, the smell of wood smoke and wet wool, and the dry heather crushed beneath their bodies. He remembered Heathcliff asking him to say the word that would make him stop, and Kit answering that he never would. He remembered Heathcliff holding his wrists against the heather, the strength of him, the warmth of his breath against Kit's neck. Then he remembered turning Heathcliff beneath him, seeing defiance soften into trust, and discovering that surrender could pass freely between them. They had held nothing back. Each had commanded, and each had yielded. In those moments, they had seemed to be made of the same substance, becoming so completely joined that Kit could no longer tell where his own desire ended and Heathcliff's began. But Kit also remembered their disagreements, Heathcliff's silences and his own furious words, the accusations whispered in locked rooms, the nights when one of them walked away only to return before morning. Heathcliff could wound him as no one else could, because no one else had ever known him so completely. Even their quarrels had belonged to their perfect union. Now Kit would have given anything to hear Heathcliff contradict him again, to see those dark eyes narrow with anger, to feel the fierce relief of being forgiven, of being kissed roughly and subdued forcefully. Some nights, Kit lay awake beside his sleeping wife and listened to the rain. He wondered where Heathcliff slept, whether he was hungry or cold, whether he still thought of the shelter. He imagined him walking through distant streets alone. At darker moments he imagined an unmarked grave somewhere between Yorkshire and London, and sometimes, with a jealousy that shamed him, Kit imagined Heathcliff in another man's arms. He wondered whether someone else had learned the strength of Heathcliff's body, whether another man had commanded him, or felt Heathcliff willingly surrender. The thought filled Kit with anger, desire, and despair in such equal measure that he could scarcely separate one from another. By morning he would dress carefully and descend to breakfast. He would kiss Edith's cheek, discuss the estate, and perform the respectable life he had chosen. But beneath every ordinary word lived the same silent regret. Heathcliff had asked whether he was sorry. Kit knew the answer now. He was sorry for every morning that had arrived without him. But then, 6 months after the wedding, when Kit had almost learned how to carry his longing without allowing anyone to see it, someone knocked at the door of Thrushcross Grange. The family had just finished dinner. Rain moved gently over the windows, and Edith was playing the pianoforte. A servant entered. "A gentleman wishes to see Mr. Earnshaw," he said. "At this hour?" Edith asked. The servant looked uncertain. He would give no name. Kit rose. In the entrance hall stood a tall man dressed entirely in black. His hair had been cut and carefully arranged. His coat was expensive, his boots polished, and a silver watch chain crossed his waistcoat. The rough labourer Hindley had sent into the fields had vanished. Only the dark eyes were unchanged. "Heathcliff," Kit whispered. For several moments neither man moved. Then Kit crossed the hall and stopped close enough to touch him, though the servants were watching. "Come with me," Kit said. He led Heathcliff into a small morning room and closed the door. The moment they were alone, Kit's composure deserted him. He caught Heathcliff by the arm, gripping him as though he needed to prove that he was warm, solid, and truly there. Relief rose through him so sharply that it was almost pain. He wanted to laugh, to strike Heathcliff for leaving, and to pull him into an embrace from which neither of them would ever emerge, their enmeshed souls becoming one and the same again and again. And again. Kit took Heathcliff in. Heathcliff had grown broader. London had given him fine clothes and a gentleman's polish, but beneath them Kit recognised the same powerful body he had held upon the moor. Happiness became desire with frightening ease. For one suspended moment their hands were only inches apart. Heathcliff's breath touched Kit's lips, and the old hunger returned so swiftly that Kit's body remembered Heathcliff before his mind had fully accepted that he was truly there. It was like only physical touch, a union, would prove to his aching heart and body what his eyes took in so eagerly. "Where have you been?" Kit asked, his voice breaking between anger and relief. "Liverpool, then London. Why did you never write?" "What could I have written?" "Congratulations upon your marriage." Heathcliff looked characteristically moody, sullen. Kit lowered his voice. "How did you live?" Heathcliff glanced towards the lighted drawing room, towards the fine servants and polished floor. "I discovered that respectable gentlemen possess appetites they prefer to keep in darkness," he said mysteriously. Kit stared at him. "Did they pay for you?" he asked with a pang of intense jealousy. Something unreadable passed across Heathcliff's face. "At first," he replied, raising one eyebrow. "And afterwards?" Heathcliff stepped closer. "Afterwards, they paid me to find others, and they paid still more to have their names forgotten." From the drawing room, Edith called her husband's name. Neither man looked away. "Men who would condemn us in daylight," Heathcliff said softly, "will surrender a fortune after dark." Kit felt the old world of locked doors and storm-lit rooms opening beneath his feet. Heathcliff smiled, but there was no gentleness in it. "Will you introduce me to your wife?" he asked, staring at Kit's beautiful, widening eyes. Beside the library fire, Nellie Dean fell silent. Mr. Lockwood realised that the rain had stopped. Water continued to fall from the eaves of Thrushcross Grange, drop after steady drop, but the storm had travelled on across the moor. "And Kit admitted him?" Mr. Lockwood asked. Nellie looked into the fire. "Kit had spent 3 years longing for that moment," she replied. "Nothing in heaven or law could have made him close the door." "What happened then?" Nellie drew the lamp nearer. "That belongs to the next part of the story. And for tonight, this is where we leave the men, the lovers." Kit stands in the warm entrance hall of Thrushcross Grange, with the respectable life he chose shining behind him. Heathcliff waits upon the threshold, carrying the darkness and freedom of the moor back into Kit's carefully ordered world. The door remains open between them, but you need not follow them any farther tonight. Kit and Heathcliff will remain where we have left them, held for a little while between the lighted house and the wild night, their eyes meeting like an embrace, their souls like one again, enmeshed, engulfed, aroused. Their passion must wait. The moor will wait. Let the old house grow quiet. Let the candles burn low. And let every unanswered question remain safely within the story. Outside, the rain has become soft again. It touches the roof of Wuthering Heights, brushes Thrushcross Grange, passes across the heather, and gathers in the little streams and pools of the moor. You are far from the urgency of modern life now. There are no messages to answer upon the moor, no glowing screens, no social media that demands your attention, only the rain, the distant wind, and the steady darkness settling over the Yorkshire hills. Allow your breathing to follow that quiet rhythm. Slowly in and gently out. The storm can continue without you. Tonight, we have watched a childhood devotion deepen into forbidden desire, and two men discover a union so complete that the society around them could neither understand nor permit it. With one another, Kit and Heathcliff were neither gentleman and servant, nor master and subordinate. Each could hold, and each could yield to pleasure. Made of the same substance, they seemed capable of becoming the same. Two lives joined more perfectly than any respectable promise could express. But society offered Kit its protection only upon certain terms. It offered him a fine house, an honoured place, and a woman he could stand beside in daylight. In return, it required him to hide the man who possessed his soul. Kit chose respectability because it promised safety, yet every door it opened carried him farther from Heathcliff, until the life that sheltered him also became the life in which he could not be whole. And Heathcliff had heard only the fearful half of Kit's confession, the warning that loving another man could destroy them both. He had departed before hearing the deeper truth, that Kit would gladly have shared his poverty, that Heathcliff was more himself than he was, and that their souls were of the same substance. Heathcliff had mistaken fear for rejection, and carried that wound away into the storm, and now Heathcliff has returned, carrying every forbidden longing Kit attempted to bury. When you are ready, the story will carry you back to them, back to the rain-darkened moor, back to their forbidden desire, and to the open door between the respectable life Kit chose and the love he could never surrender. For now, let the rain carry everything else away. Rest deeply and sleep well.